Good morning, everybody. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Wow, these are really bright lights. I'm Laura Baker. I am the president of Communities and Insights Hub for QuestionPro. Thanks, everybody. And thank you, Viv. I guess it's pretty obvious if you didn't know Viv before, he doesn't think small. He's got a wonderful vision for the company, and that's exactly why I joined. So I've been with QuestionPro about 3 months, maybe 4. I have the wonderful pleasure of welcoming somebody else who is another big vision guy. Ryan Barry is the CEO of AppCues. He's another one that I'm thinking, Crystal has this Longhorn for us later today, and when we were waiting for Viv to come up, I'm like, is he coming in on the Longhorn? Like, where is he? It was a bit of a pause, and then I thought, why didn't I get Ryan to come in on the Longhorn? That would have been so great. But he's one of those guys, fun, amazing, family guy, loves to be outdoors. If you haven't met him before, try and find him before he leaves this afternoon because he is another fantastic person to meet. But he is obsessed about customer outcomes like every single person in this room. And he's been scaling businesses for 15 years. So when we were thinking, how do we follow up Viv's vision with another big vision person, Ryan came to mind. Ryan and I met actually through a colleague, a woman who's worked for both of us. And she calls us both her favorite bosses, which, listen, that just means she's an exceptional salesperson and very, very diplomatic. But it also means that's exactly why I love him so much. He is, I can't see where he is, but he and his team are here. Please give a really warm and, I really can't see anything, a really warm and loud welcome to Ryan, who is gonna walk us through a wonderful keynote and get this really kicked off for the day.
All right, before we get started, there's a lot of room over there for all of you folks on the wall. Do me a favor, move on over, spread out, and that way we have some space. All right, one more thing before we start. Can everybody just give it up for the QuestionPro team? What a wonderful event this is. And thank you for being here. For those of you parents who thought you were gonna get away from K-pop Demon Hunters for the week, sorry. Let's be honest, that song's awesome. So I was debating between that and Bad Bunny, but I had to keep it real with K-pop Demon Hunters. I wanted to earn some street cred with my daughter, Blake. I'm really excited to be here today for a variety of reasons. There's a lot of you in this crowd that I've known for a long time that I haven't had a chance to see in a while. So it's great to connect with old friends, but my hope today is to give you a few ideas that you can bring to work tomorrow. This is a cool dolphin. I'll tell you more about him later, but I absolutely love Austin, Texas. It's one of my favorite cities in the world. It's very inspiring. There's a lot of great art and culture and brisket. If you haven't realized this yet, Franklin Barbecue is up the street. I may or may not have already gone twice this week. What I want to talk to you about today is a little bit of advice that I've picked up over the years on how to lead transformation. I ChatGPT'd the definition of transformation this morning. Transformation is to fundamentally redefine a process, a business, a culture, or a product. And I think all of you in some way, shape, or form are probably going through a transformation in your business. You probably have been for a while. The world's been moving very, very quickly. And over the years, I've consulted with hundreds of brands. I've led some transformation. I'm kind of currently leading a transformation. And I've codified some of the things that get in our way, and I want to share them with you so you can maybe invert and avoid some failure within your own business or just go faster with a little bit less drama. So if this will work, let's see. Oh, there we go. But first, I'll tell you a little bit about me. The most important thing for me is my family, so I wanted you all to meet them. That is my wife, Jillian, my 3 kids, Blake, Callum, who's the dude with the aviators, and Declan, whose entire personality is baseball. Any of you who have a 10-year-old son, you might be able to relate. And that's my dog, Honey. And I wanted to put Honey up there because if I ever network with you and I'm on a call and I shout Honey in your ear, I'm not talking to you. So I'm very sorry that I did that. And my colleagues in the audience have all been yelled Honey before. I'm actually leaving. I'm going to be here for as long as I can today, but I'm rushing back to Boston to then rush back to Chicago because my wife, Jill, is running the Chicago Marathon this weekend. So send her some love. She's going to crush. Friends are very, very important to me. I think in a world where all the technology around us is making us maybe feel a little more lonely, a little bit more uncertain, I've realized in the last couple of years that relationships matter more than anything. And they're really, really important to me. So I spend a lot of time with friends, and there's a lot of you in this room that I consider friends. And it's just a really important moment in time to remember what actually matters. Because you can get pretty lost doom scrolling LinkedIn all day with all the your job's gonna go away rhetoric. but just grip the relationships in your life. I also like to have fun, y'all. I like to have a lot of fun doing anything. I mean, I'm having fun right now. This is great, although it is pretty bright, so I can't actually see any of you. But that's kind of fun too, you know, it's a little adaptability. My favorite thing to do is skiing or being out in the ocean. And I had to come to Austin and brag about the fact that I'm from Boston. That's a picture of me when the Celtics won the NBA Finals a couple of years ago. That's my childhood best friend, so it was, that's really awesome. I also really like business. As crazy as it may sound, I think business is fun. I think the complexity of navigating a market and humans that are all different and competitors who are not playing by the same rules as you, constantly changing, is just fascinating. And I think it's fun because it might be easier if we were all algorithms living inside of agents, but it'd certainly be a lot less fun. And so I do what I do because I think it's just quite enjoyable and intellectually stimulating. And for many, many years, what's driven me is this concept that I've completely made up called modern business. And this is the first time I've ever actually put on a PowerPoint slide, so thank you to QuestionPro for making me write this down. I believe companies that keep the customer at the heart of their strategy and then hire like-minded people that have the same shared values and empower them to make moves will adapt to any market change. And I fundamentally believe that at my core. I spent a lot of time in the market research industry, candidly, not because I'm a market research person, because I believe that customer-centric decision-making helps you grow faster. I know more about market research than I probably care to admit at this point, but this is why I do it, and it's actually why I do what I do now as well. And I just think, like, if the customer and their problems and their goals are at the center of what you do, the tech stuff will come, and you'll figure out the right way to get at that. And then a lot of what I'm gonna talk to you about today is how you set your teams up to go fast together without a lot of drama. Here we go. So before I joined AppCues almost 8 months ago. After a very, very long career in market research, I worked for an awesome company called GMI that got bought by Kantar, and then I joined a company called Zappy. It was called Zappy Store at the time. In 2014, it was a $25,000 business with 2 employees. And you know, the linearity of this chart is funny because everything looks linear. You can make any trend line look linear. Zappy is now an industry leader, does business with some of the biggest brands in the world. And I had a really cool opportunity to end my time at Zappy with releasing a book kind of codifying all the learnings that I had over the time. But what the linear line here doesn't show is we lost 40% of our business overnight. We had to pivot the company twice. And again, the customer being at the center was what made the linearity possible. So I recently joined a completely new industry. I'm leading a business called AppCues. And the reason I joined is I'm really passionate about the problem. I think data, which is what a lot of you in this room do, if it's harnessed correctly, can allow you to delight customers. But so often customers aren't getting what they need at the exact moment that they need it. And so the technology that we have allows us to do that. And I'm just really passionate about seeing, can I get the right thinking in front of the customer at the right moment to drive business outcomes for our clients. One of my original, I want to go do this is I used to always think, if I could only have my best sales rep in every single meeting at every single point in time, we would never, ever, ever lose a deal. And I do think technology enables that if your data and your systems are harnessed correctly. And so a lot of what we're up to is trying to attack key moments in the customer journey where there's leakage and really drive velocity there. So I'm 6 months into CX. My customers are completely different. I no longer sell to VPs of insights. I sell to chief product officers, CMOs. But I gotta be honest with you, it sort of feels like Groundhog Day. The same shit that got in all the VPs of insights way, which still does, by the way, I still am friends with many of you, gets in the CMO's way. And it's gonna be a theme throughout my talk. It's not tech, it's people. And I've also been realizing this, and this has been something I've recently become quite obsessed with. As you go through time, you gain experience. Experience gives you intuition, and you're like, oh, I've seen that movie. I've solved that problem. And that's why you always want to hire people with proven experience doing something. But at a time when literally every playbook that you've ever known is getting turned on its head, how important is intuition if you don't understand the problem at its root cause? And so I'm constantly coaching people and challenging myself to think through, okay, you see some themes, but what's actually happening here? What's the actual current state of what's going on? And I'm finding myself wanting to hire people who have more of an ability to look at things for what they are than people who have the been there, done that playbooks. And so I think in the world that's being a little bit disrupted, maybe we'd all argue, finding people who are curious and adaptable and are leaning in are the types of people I want to build with. Not people who say, well, I worked at company X and I've only seen that movie and therefore this is exactly what we must do. My colleague Bernie's in the front row. She's our head of product. And she has not worked in a SaaS business for a long time, but you know what she is? An amazing product leader. So I'm really appreciative of you, Bernie. All right, so I think all this is a backdrop of like, we actually do need to make some changes. I think there's a lot of friction in the way we delight customers. There's duplication of efforts in B2B businesses. There's B2C businesses that are kind of a mess. And if we catch customers in stride, we'll grow, but we do have some fundamental gaps in our systems, in our data, in our processes that make that really hard. How many of you buy a ton of tech and you wonder, what the hell do I do with this? I'm one of them. And every time someone in the company, in any company I've worked for, comes to me and says, we want to buy a new software, I'm like immediately skeptical that it's going to sit there and become shelfware. But that's not the vendor's fault. It's the lack of the ability of teams to get their data, their systems, and their workflows together. And that shows up for customers. And I think if we get our shit together, our systems, our data, make our teams work together in stride, we have a really good opportunity to really ride this wave of AI disruption. If we don't, we're gonna get completely eroded, and it's gonna happen very quickly. I think one of the things that Viv said that I completely agree with is like, those companies are gonna be the new platform, but your moat is your memory, it's your data, it's your expertise, it's your talent. But if you harness that and bring that to your customers, AI will be an enabler. But there's so many companies that are just rushing to put wrappers on products that they're just kind of thinly veiled AI solutions. Those are the things that you need to harness. But of course, all of you folks are data people. You need to be able to harness that data and actually be able to use it. This may be a little controversial, but I don't believe we have a technology problem. And I don't think we've had a technology problem in a long time. Technology just keeps getting exponentially better. There was 3 or 4 releases that happened on Monday that making agents take an hour instead of 2 weeks. I mean, it's unbelievable, but are teams actually gonna be able to deliver them and create value with them? That's still the question that ruminates in my head as I move forward. I think the real challenges are people, process, and leadership. And I think there's a big leadership problem in businesses because everybody's quite stressed. There's a lot of founders who are overly gripping the steering wheel and micromanaging teams. There's people who are in middle management who are like, oh shit, what am I going to do? And then their employees are like quite stressed and maybe burnt out. They used to work in offices, now they work in little Zoom boxes. And so there's quite a challenge inherent in the way people are showing up. And I think that's really what I was hoping to talk to you folks about today. This thing, there we go. And you know, to sort of transition into this, I'm somebody who, when things are changing all around me, I'm trying to figure out what isn't changing. And this is a weird time because I find myself knocking on a lot of wood doors like, is this still real? Is that still wood? Is that still a desk? And one of my favorite books of all time was written in 1935 by Dale Carnegie. It's called How to Make Friends and Influence People. In 1935. And if you read the book, it reads like a quick hit, a silver bullet to make friends with people. But there's just one thing, you have to genuinely mean it. Because people want to be seen, they want to be felt, they want to be heard, and that is still a constant right now. Actually, I would argue more than ever in a quite lonely time. Like, look at how good it feels to be in a room with a bunch of people. Like, it feels great, it's so energizing. And so I spend a lot of time trying to focus on what's not changing, because the tech around me, if I understand what's not changing, I can enable the technology outcomes that I want. So I'm gonna talk about some things that I think people maybe underestimate when they're leading folks, and I encourage you to think about your own teams and recognize you might have a team of 10, and of the 6 bullet points or so that I'm gonna flash here, every one of those 10 people might be completely different on every single one of those. When do people work best? Well, some people are early morning people. Some people need to sleep till 10 a.m., but they wanna work till 3 p.m. How the hell are you gonna run a team if one person's only productive till 10 and the other person's really useless until about 2? Well, you need to understand that. But everybody is actually different. Our brains work differently. And now we're no longer working, forget factory work or even knowledge work. We're working at a place where the expectations of human output are like pretty significant. So we need to change the way we're asking our people to show up. Everybody handles stress differently, but we expect us all to be homogenous. You don't know if someone's in a little Zoom box if they're feeling a certain way. Whereas if you're in a room and you piss somebody off, you can be like, oh shit, I've really frustrated that person. But understanding how people handle stress, I think, is quite important. There's a lot of different tools you can use to do this. I personally like Hogan because we all develop armor as adults. And Hogan allows you to see your most primal instincts, like when you're super high, when you're super low, what do you naturally do? What do you naturally like to do? And I try to like get to know people as I'm recruiting or as I'm leading them so I can understand how to best show up for them, because that's, I just believe, how you get the best out of folks. How people learn. So I've run a few executive teams now, and some people like to pre-read and comment in Notion documents, and they get quite frustrated at being talked at out loud or being presented to. I'm one of those people. I hate when people show up and present PowerPoint slides to me. Others, they learn by talking through stuff. So like how does that then make sense in a team meeting where half the group wants to read and half the group wants to be talked at? And so I've always sort of thought about it in the lens of like, well, if I'm meeting you one-to-one, I'm gonna go where you're at, but we're gonna have to develop some team contracts so we can all learn. And this might sound like something subtle, but if everybody's nodding their head, but two people learn differently, you might leave a meeting with a fundamentally different understanding that costs your business 2 quarters of productivity. How do people use technology? So I worked in consumer insights for a while. I now sell to product marketers and whatnot. And some people, they have the same exact job title, and on all of our persona slides, they're gonna show up and look like the same person. But brand manager A and brand manager B, let's pick on those 2 people. Brand manager A is super tech forward. They lean into new toys. They're super curious. They figure stuff out. Brand manager B is terrified. They sit right next to each other. They're on the exact same team. And so understanding that and moving to a place of like, how can you actually connect with both of them as you're developing not just technology, but products and services, I think is really important. I'm increasingly fascinated by generational biases, and I read this wonderful book, it was called Generations, and the point that they were making through a lot of social science data was the thing that's changed through generations is technology. Whether you were being raised in that time, whether you were a parent, whether you were a grandparent, for the record, I'm not even 40 yet, but I've recently been called old by a few of my Gen Z employees. And I've been fascinated by this concept of like, well, how do they learn? Just because I used to go into my president's office as a 22-year-old and just be like, hey, Dan, how does this work? Hey, Dan, what about this? And just because that's how I learn doesn't necessarily mean that's how those people learn. And then if you think about if you're a Gen Z and you're now navigating this AI world, you might be showing up a little bit differently. And so understanding that and connecting with people is quite important. Where they live. They might be from Margarita, India. They might live in 3 different places at once, but like, how does that manifest into how they're gonna show up? By the way, Viv, can we do this conference in Margarita, India next year? That'd be kind of cool. And where are they in family life? Like I lead a lot of people who have young kids, so that means like they gotta sign off at 5, and they're probably gonna come back online at some point, and having the space in your culture to vibe with that is really quite important. And then this is the thing that I try to unite on. I believe in hiring people of all walks of life, but I want them to have shared values. And of all the people I've like led over the years, if they're curious, if they're adaptable, if they're growth-minded, and they're coachable, then those are the type of people I want to build with. And that could mean they're introverts, it could mean they're extroverts, it could mean they're Gen Z, it could mean they're baby boomers. It doesn't actually quite matter, but those shared values I think are quite important as a backdrop. So this is your team. They're all living in these different vectors. They show up in the little Zoom box, and we have to lead them. And so leadership is a pretty hard job. I think gone are the days of the middle manager who sits in one-on-ones and listens and does therapy all day. Those days are over. We have to be able to lead through the work. We have to be able to get the best out of people. And there's so many of these business books that are just like, sit back and ask questions and never be assertive. And finding that balance of like, you're actually about to drive the car off the road. Let me coach you on how to do it, and actually coach you is quite hard. And so I have a couple of pieces of advice before I get into transformation on leadership. I think you have to paint a really clear mission, like really clear, and keep saying it over and over and over again. I do a Tuesday video at AppCues at Zappy. It was called the Wednesday video. And it's basically me every 7 days saying, as a reminder, here's where we're going. As a reminder, here's where we're going. And it's like repetition, but it's quite important for people to be like, oh, that's right. I had a really shitty day. My customer's mad at me, but this is all worth it because this is what we're trying to do. And it's very simple to do, but it requires clarity. And then the next level down is, okay, if you're a support person, how does the big lofty vision connect to your job on a Tuesday when you have 6 tickets that are high and urgent? Well, that's the job of support leaders, to think through how do they make that connection. And then the coaching point is really key. I mean, too many leaders are not coaching. Actually coaching, like sitting there and listening to their calls and reviewing their code and reviewing their PRs and pushing them to do better and helping them get the work done. They just sit in one-on-ones all day. I don't do one-on-ones if I can get away with it. I actually hate them, but I talk to my colleagues often, like quick Slack huddle, what's up? Let's talk about this at this exact moment. I would encourage you, if your calendar is littered with one-on-ones, to just lean into, if you forget everything else, delete them for a month and see how much more productive you'll be. So you're dealing with all these people. The job is getting really hard. You go to a board meeting and it's super stressful. The AI roadmap's behind, our EBITDA number's off, we want to be growing faster, everybody's yelling at you. There's 6 VCs who literally haven't operated a business in 20 years yelling at you. And then you leave the meeting and you got to show up for your employees. Get your shit together. It's not their fault. Like, we just recently hired a new CMO, and I asked all the marketers, like, what do you want in a leader? And Sarah, who's our content marketer, was like, This is actually her sentence. I want somebody who can grapple with their own shit and then show up for us. And it was just like quite sobering to hear that from a really talented woman of like how many times that she's had a leader who hasn't been able to just go for a walk and chill out for a minute before they show up in that meeting. And I'm a pretty like high-strung, emotional dude. So like I've listened to this advice myself. Like I'm about to go for a walk if I'm pissed off because my energy is not going to be able to show up for the team in the right way. Meeting people where they are and coaching them is important. But if you then are only coaching one person, you become the tent pole. Anybody remember that article from HBR? It was like in the 90s about the monkey on your back. Anybody read that article? It still happens today. It's like, hey, boss, I have this problem. I'd like to escalate it to you. And hey, boss, I have this problem. I'd like to escalate it to you. And I'd like to escalate it to you. And every time I hear an escalation, I go, oh my God, something is fundamentally broken in our workflow. Something is completely wrong if everybody's escalating. That means teams aren't able to unblock themselves. Whew, people are complex. Leadership is hard. Holy shit. And every AI is stressing us out. There's probably been 3 AI releases since we've been sitting in this room for 20 minutes. And everybody's really stressed. So we have to transform our businesses. We have to stay modern. So how do we do that? So as I said to you at the beginning of this talk, I consulted with a lot of brands in my life. I've seen them massively fail in big, lofty goals. I've seen them succeed. And about 5 years ago, I was watching, it was really kind of a meta story. I was sitting in a hotel in Bulgaria. We had an all-company offsite. And I was just chilling at the end of the day, kind of reflecting. And there's 300 people like in the pool area having a drink after work. And I'm sitting there like, oh my God, after this week, they're all gonna go back to their little Zoom boxes, and this energy is gonna go away, and how the hell do I harness it? So I asked them all to come up to my room the next morning for breakfast, which you can imagine how intimidating that probably was. They're like, why is this guy asking us to come to breakfast in his room? And what I basically said is, I'm gonna take my accountability hat off, and I wanna study y'all for 6 months. And I wanna see with some of the themes of like what gets in your way. And I'm not gonna govern you, I'm not gonna be your manager, I just wanna like meet with you every 2 weeks to learn what's going on. These were code-based refactors, persona projects, system overhauls, new product development, all different types of transformations. But the common theme was they were big, they required a ton of cross-functionality, and they were something we needed to be true to make the company successful. So over the course of the 6 months, I met with them, and it was the same patterns over and over and over again. It was the same patterns that would get in all of the brands I was consulting with's way of successfully doing insights better. And now in my life today, successfully doing customer experience better. So I want to share them with you. And my hope is if you remember the people dynamic and think through these as you're going through your transformation, you can move a little faster when you get back to work tomorrow. This one is like a bit of a bugbear of mine. And even in a room filled with CX and MR people, I still have to say it. Your customer doesn't just brush their teeth. They drank 3 glasses of tequila last night. I actually did drink some tequila last night. It was fast. It was really good, by the way. But I also worked out this morning. I ate brisket for lunch. I'm probably gonna have a salad today. My point is, I don't just operate in your category. I can see a few of my customers at AppCues in the audience. They don't just think about AppCues when they wake up. They have 50 other things that are taking their time and their headspace at work, let alone outside of work. Yet I think a lot of times we're really myopic and think like, oh, I need category people and I just need to focus them. And it's just utter bullshit. You have to think of the holistic customer. And like we all learned about this in Marketing 101 as freshmen in college. It's called market orientation, but we don't do it. Who are our customers? What are they trying to do? What is their holistic life like outside of work and inside of work? And if you fully understand that, it gets a lot easier. But take the time to really know that. And anytime you're thinking in a myopic way about like, they're just living in my product all day, just remember that's not actually true. They don't give a shit about your product. They care about themselves and their career and their families and their jobs. The second is problem definition. One of my favorite examples here is the word product marketing. If I went around this entire, I wish I still had the quick poll. If I went around this entire room and said, what does product marketing do? I would undoubtedly get 100 different answers. And we think about that a lot in, like I think about that a lot in business where like people are like, this is what the problem is and this is what we need to do. And teams like say really fast words and they think they're on the same page and then they rush off to do solutions. And then 3 months later, it's like, oh, I meant something completely different. That's not actually what I meant. And I think it takes the time to be pedantic on a few moments to be like, do we all agree of what the actual problem is we're trying to solve? Have we written that down? Are we all using, if not the same words, but do we understand each other's different words? Like, I'll pick on my colleague in the front row again. We were saying different words, but we kept clicking back to be like, oh, we're actually saying the same thing. And that clarity here lets a lot of stuff flow downhill afterwards. So getting really clear on the problem is something that I think too many companies skip at the beginning of projects that then create failure. This goes back to my point about first principle thinking. What's actually happening right now? How does it work? specifically, in detail. How does everything actually happen? What are the current state metrics? What are the measurements? What are the processes? What are the implications of those things? And then what needles are you actually trying to move? The amount of times in my Zappy life, people would call me and say, no matter what happens, we're gonna launch this ad on Monday, can you please test it? I'd be like, why the fuck are you testing it? And then we have companies that come into my new business who are like, I need to fundamentally change my onboarding motion. And I'm like, well, how does it work today? And they're like, oh, we don't know and we can't measure it. And I'm like, so how are you gonna know if you've improved anything? So again, you have to take the time to understand the current state and then sort of anchor on what the KPIs are that you're trying to get to and make sure you can measure them. Because a lot of times it's easy to write a Notion page, throw it out to everybody. If you don't use Notion, it's just a documentation platform. Write it out in Notion and everybody feels good because we wrote down a plan. But how do you know if it's actually working if you haven't actually mapped the from to that you're trying to go on? The next couple are all intrinsically linked. The smallest group of people possible. Like the smallest group possible needs to be doing the work. They need to be multidisciplined, but you don't need the middle manager, the manager, and the VP of the same freaking project in the same meeting at every given time. Who are the 5 people who are gonna work together to drive something that are gonna kind of cross-contract and have their dependencies mapped? That's the thinking that's really, really important, because this is what happens the next time. There's like a FOMO thing. Well, I want to be in that meeting. I want to weigh in. And so I think a lot of times we conflate the people doing the work with the people whose work needs to change as a result of the transformation we're making. And those are 2 different audiences. The second audience is the stakeholders. We need to communicate with them. We need to get their advice. We need to bring them along the journey, but they're not going to drive the transformation. They're going to be receiving the transformation. And so I think getting those 2 things kind of decoupled is something I've seen teams really struggle with over the years. This one is also fascinating to me. The contract. We do contracts when we do business deals. We would never do a business deal without a contract, although we all probably spend too much money on legal fees. But the awkwardness of like, hey, Andrew, you said you're gonna do this. Are you gonna do this? Yes, Ryan, I will do this on Tuesday. We don't do that with each other. So we go on these Zoom meetings and everybody's gonna leave that Zoom meeting and have 10 other things to do afterwards. And I leave and I'm like, oh yeah, Andrew's got me. He's gonna do that. And then a week later, he's like, oh yeah, but I had a vacation, my son had a baseball tournament, I had 3 other things I needed to do. Sorry, dude, I just didn't have time to. All I needed to do was know that, and I would have been able to say, there's no way we're gonna make progress because homeboy's out for 2 weeks. There's no way we can do it. And it's not like everything, the decks are always gonna be perfectly clear. There are 6 other competing priorities. Like, I mean, I imagine half the audience has checked your Slack 4 times since I've been up here talking at you, because you have like different shit going on. So understanding those relative priorities and actually understanding if your team has the bandwidth to do something is quite important. This shows up a lot in product teams, like what are we not doing is a really important question to be asking yourself. And then this one. How many of you are executives? Raise your hands. VPs above? All right, this message is for all of you. Get in the room or get out of the room. You can't be somewhere in the middle. I'm gonna tell you a story of something that happened 2 weeks ago. We had a company who comes to us and they're like, we need to fix all this leakage in our customer journey. And the team did a bunch of work, and it's great, it's exciting. So I check in with the team, I'm like, what's up with customer X? And they're like, we haven't done anything yet. I'm like, what do you mean? All the work's already done. They're like, well, we're waiting for the CEO to show up to the meeting and approve it. I mean, get out of here. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And so these teams then lose all their intrinsic motivation. They've lost 6 weeks of time just so someone's ego can get stroked by approving something. And I get it, like there are things that you need to have, you need to ensure there's taste throughout your customer journey. There are certain non-negotiables that you need to have as a company. Write them down and communicate them. I call them hard edges. So like at the start of a project, I'll be like, here are the 3 things I like non-negotiable for me. Let's debate those right now. And then it's like, let me get on your side of the table and help you versus like be in the shit all the time with you. And I think a lot of times hierarchy really they don't even realize how much of an impact they're making on the morale and the velocity of projects. And it's not like it's malice intent. It's just how it shows up. And I have to remind myself all the time, I'm an assertive CEO. So if I talk in a meeting and don't preface it with something like, I'm just thinking out loud here, I'm just giving advice, this is not a directive, people will swirl for like 3 weeks, like, what exactly did he mean? And it's like, so for those of you who aren't executives, if you feel like that, pick up the phone and say, hey, boss, what the hell did you mean today? You made no sense. And I mean that for my colleagues in the room too. So these things, when I've seen teams think about them up front, they run fast, they adapt, they're able to move quickly and get real business outcomes, because we're not running transformation projects to run transformation projects. We're running transformation projects to delight our customers and make money. So what I've seen is if the teams don't do all the things I just shared, and they naturally just get along, somehow they can meander their way through it. So spending T&E dollars on getting teams together just like this, it can help shortcut some weaknesses in your workflow. Because if I understand you, it's easy to be like, oh, dude, you got baseball, right? Like, you're not gonna be here tomorrow. But the thing you don't wanna build your business around is heroics, because that's the other thing that happens if you don't map this. One person who's carrying the entire bag for everybody, and then looks like this dolphin here. By the way, the backstory of the dolphin is, this was an internal icon when I joined the business, and I absolutely love it. We tested it with customers, and they love it too, and this represents our expertise, so thank you for meeting him today. His name's Captain QuestionPro. So in summary, folks, understand your customers from all vectors, and don't forget that they don't just live in your category. Have a clear mission and ensure your team knows how their work ladders to it. Ensure you have the right people with the right values, but also the diversity of skill set and thinking to do the right work, and do the awkward thing, ensure the contracts are in place. I rant about this sort of stuff all the time. I do a bi-weekly newsletter. If this was remotely interesting for you, get at me. If you want to talk, I'm here all day. I'd love to learn from you as well as we go forward on how you're helping teams move faster. The technology platform is going to be the new constant, but as people, it's what we do together that's going to determine if we're successful. Thank you very much for your time and your attention today. I appreciate you.